My mother did the thing she always does at Thanksgiving. She went around the table. "Let's go around and share what we're grateful for," she said, clasping her hands together like a kindergarten teacher starting circle time. "But let's make it fun. Share something you've accomplished this year, something that makes the family proud." It wasn't a gratitude exercise. It was a performance review. And I knew exactly where it was heading. My older brother Jason went first. He straightened his Brooks Brothers tie and announced that his architecture firm had just won a contract to design a new hospital wing in Hartford. Modest applause. Genuine pride from our parents. My sister Danielle went next. She'd been promoted to Director of Communications at a Fortune 500 company in Manhattan. My mother squeezed her hand across the table. My younger brother Tyler, the baby of the family at 25, shared that he'd just been accepted to Stanford Business School. Full scholarship. My father actually stood up to shake his hand. Then it got to me, and my mother, rather than letting me speak, decided to speak for me. "And Adrian is..." She paused, searching for something to say. She took a sip of wine, buying time. "Adrian is our free spirit. She's still figuring things out, which is perfectly fine. Not everyone peaks at the same time." She smiled at me the way you smile at a dog that's learned to sit. We're proud of all our children, even the ones who are still searching. That was it. That was my accomplishment for the year. Still searching. 21 family members nodded sympathetically. A few offered encouraging smiles. My Aunt Gloria patted my shoulder as she passed behind my chair on the way to the kitchen. "You'll find your things, sweetie." My name is Adrian Cole. I'm 30 years old. I was sitting at my parents' Thanksgiving table in their split-level home in Fairfield County, Connecticut, wearing an oversized cardigan and a patient expression, watching my family categorize me as the one without a career for the 9th consecutive year. What none of them knew was that I had a career. I had a company. I had 4,600 residential units across 11 states, generating $312 million in annual revenue. I had a real estate portfolio that 3 separate appraisers had valued at $1.8 billion. And I had a phone call coming from Forbes magazine in approximately 37 minutes that was going to rearrange every assumption this family had built about me since I dropped out of college at 21. But at that table, in that moment, I was just Adrian, the free spirit, the searcher, the one they were proud of in that careful, conditional way that meant they weren't proud at all. Jason was explaining the hospital design to anyone who'd listen. "The atrium alone is going to be revolutionary," he said, pulling up renderings on his phone. "It's a completely new approach to patient flow architecture." I nodded along. I didn't mention that I owned the building 3 blocks from that hospital, or the 6 buildings adjacent to it, or the 14-unit apartment complex on the next street that I'd acquired last spring for $4.2 million cash. Danielle was talking about her corporate communication strategy. "We rebranded the entire company," she said. "New logo, new messaging framework, new stakeholder engagement model." My supervisor said it was the best work the department had produced in a decade. "Impressive," I said, and I meant it. Danielle was genuinely talented. What she didn't know was that one of her company's board members was also one of my tenants. He rented the penthouse in a building I owned on the Upper West Side. $22,000 a month. Tyler was fielding questions about Stanford. The program is 2 years, he explained. After that, I'm thinking venture capital. Maybe start a fund. Dad leaned forward, eyes bright. That's the future, son. Real wealth creation. I thought about the $312 million in revenue my company had generated this year. Real wealth creation indeed. My phone was silent in my pocket, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. 3 weeks ago, a journalist from Forbes had contacted my property management company, Cole Residential Partners, requesting an interview with the founder for an upcoming feature on the 30 most influential people in real estate under 40. My COO, Lisa Huang, had handled the initial conversations. The journalist had been stunned to discover that the founder of one of the largest privately held residential real estate companies in the country was a 30-year-old woman with no public profile, no social media presence, and no college degree. She'd wanted to do a phone interview during the Thanksgiving holiday to meet the magazine's print deadline. I'd agreed because I was ready. The call was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. It was currently 6:53. 37 minutes. My mother was circling back to the career conversation, the way she always did after 2 glasses of wine. She couldn't help herself. It was her favorite subject. The taxonomy of her children's achievements was her hobby. Adrian, sweetie, she said, leaning toward me with the intimacy of a woman about to deliver wisdom she thought was revolutionary. Have you thought any more about going back to school? You were so good at math in high school. You could be an accountant, an actuary even. My father nodded. Actuaries make excellent money. Stable career. I took a bite of cranberry sauce. I've thought about it, I said. She patted my hand. There's also real estate, she offered, and I nearly choked. Your father's friend Bob is a realtor. He's always looking for new agents. You could get licensed in a few months. Adrian could sell houses, Dad agreed. She's personable. I sell houses, I thought. Just not the way you think. My phone buzzed once. Lisa, 6:58 p.m. Forbes confirmed. Journalist is calling at 7:30 sharp. She's using the angle. Most secretive real estate mogul in America. Also, she found the Connecticut portfolio. She knows you own half of downtown New Haven. I typed back, good. Let her find it. That's the point. The story of how I built Cole Residential Partners into a $1.8 billion real estate empire while my family suggested I become a realtor starts with a dropped-out semester and a very cheap duplex. At 21, I left the University of Connecticut midway through my junior year, not because I was struggling academically, because I'd found something that made sitting in a lecture hall feel like a waste of time. I've been taking a real estate economics class as an elective. The professor assigned a case study on value-add investing, the practice of buying undervalued properties, improving them, and generating returns through increased rental income or resale. Something clicked. Not the theoretical concepts. Those were straightforward. What clicked was the realization that I could see value where other people saw decay. I could look at a neglected building and understand, instinctively, mathematically, exactly what it would take to make it profitable. It was like having a sense other people didn't have, a property synesthesia. I dropped out and used $28,000 in savings, money I'd made from 3 years of working double shifts at a restaurant during school, to put a down payment on a duplex in Bridgeport. It was in terrible condition. The roof leaked. The plumbing was ancient. The previous owner had given up on it. I spent 4 months renovating it myself, not hiring contractors, myself. I watched YouTube videos on plumbing repair. I taught myself electrical basics from library books. I refinished floors, patched walls, replaced fixtures. When I was done, I rented both units for a combined $2,800 a month. My mortgage payment was $1,100. I was 21 years old and generating $1,700 a month in positive cash flow from a building everyone else had written off. That duplex was the seed. Within a year, I'd used the cash flow and a refinanced equity line to buy 2 more properties. Within 2 years, I had 11. By year 3, I'd accumulated 47 units and formed Cole Residential Partners as a proper LLC. I hired Lisa Wong, a Harvard MBA who'd spent 5 years at a major real estate private equity firm, to be my COO. She thought I was insane. Then she saw my spreadsheets and decided I was a genius, which might also be insane, but at least it was profitable insanity. The growth accelerated. By year 5, I had 800 units. By year 7, 2,200. By year 9, today, 4,600 units across 11 states. We'd expanded from small multifamily buildings into mid-rise apartment complexes, mixed-use developments, and affordable housing projects. Our company provided homes for over 12,000 people. My investment thesis was simple and ruthless. Buy undervalued properties in transitioning neighborhoods. Renovate them to a standard that respects the community. Set rents at fair market rates, not maximized rates. Build a portfolio that generates consistent cash flow while appreciating in value over time. It worked because I treated tenants like people instead of revenue streams. Our retention rate was 89%, nearly double the industry average. Tenants stayed because the buildings were maintained, management was responsive, and rent increases were predictable and reasonable. Word spread. Communities welcomed us instead of protesting us. Municipalities offered us incentives to develop in their districts. And the portfolio's value compounded year after year, silently, invisibly, growing into something that made my family's definition of success look like a rounding error. Total portfolio value, $1.8 billion. Annual revenue, $312 million. Net worth, approximately $940 million. Properties owned, 4,600 units across 11 states. Employees, 187. College degree, none. Through all 9 years, I maintained my cover with disciplined simplicity. I lived in a modest apartment in New Haven, the same city where I owned over $200 million in property. I drove an 8-year-old Jeep. I wore clothes from normal stores. When family asked what I did, I said I was doing some property stuff, which they interpreted as odd jobs and handyman work, which was close enough to the truth to be technically accurate and far enough from it to be completely misleading. My parents suggested careers at every gathering: realtor, accountant, office manager, dental hygienist. Each suggestion was a small burial. Each one told me exactly how they measured worth. And each one made me more certain that I'd built something they could never diminish, because they'd never known to try. 7:15 p.m., 15 minutes, the pie was being served. My mother's pumpkin pie, which was actually from Costco, but presented on a ceramic plate to suggest otherwise. Tyler was talking about Silicon Valley culture. Jason was showing more hospital renderings. Danielle was checking her work email between bites because corporate communications directors never truly stop working. So Adrian, my father said, settling back with his pie, any plans for next year? Any new directions? I'm considering some things, I said. That was the truest thing I'd said all evening. I was considering a $140 million acquisition of a mixed-use development in Boston. I was considering expanding into 3 new states. I was considering taking the company public within 2 years. My father nodded with the gentle encouragement you give someone filling out a job application. Good. It's important to have goals. My phone buzzed. Lisa. 10 minutes. Journalist is excited. She told her editor this might be their cover story. Also, she found the affordable housing portfolio. She's calling it the most socially responsible real estate operation in the country. I slid the phone back and ate my pie. It was decent for Costco. 7:25 p.m. 5 minutes. Aunt Gloria was telling a story about her cat. Uncle Dave was falling asleep in his chair. My mother was loading the dishwasher in the kitchen, her voice carrying through the doorway as she chatted with Danielle about some workplace drama. Jason was showing Tyler something on his laptop about sustainable design principles. Normal family Thanksgiving. The last normal one they'd have for a while. 7:28 p.m. 2 minutes. My phone buzzed again. Lisa. She's calling your cell directly. I gave her the number. Brace yourself. This is going to be big. I set down my fork, wiped my mouth with a napkin, took a slow breath. The phone rang at exactly 7:30 p.m. The ringtone cut through the post-dinner haze like a fire alarm. Not because it was loud, because of the silence that followed when I answered it on speaker. I didn't plan to answer on speaker. My thumb hit the wrong button. But sometimes accidents are architecture in disguise. Hello, this is Adrienne, I said. Miss Cole, a crisp, professional female voice filled the dining room. This is Rebecca Torres from Forbes magazine. Thank you so much for making time on Thanksgiving. I want to start by saying that our entire editorial team is fascinated by what you've built. Every head in the room turned toward me with the synchronized precision of a flock of birds changing direction. Forbes, my father mouthed silently. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate Forbes taking an interest. Taking an interest is an understatement, Rebecca continued, her enthusiasm undisguised. Cole Residential Partners is one of the most remarkable real estate stories we've encountered. 4,600 units across 11 states, $312 million in annual revenue, a portfolio valued at nearly $2 billion, and a founder who has been completely invisible to the public for 9 years. I'd like to start with the obvious question. How does someone build a real estate empire of this scale without anyone knowing? The silence in the dining room wasn't silence anymore. It was a vacuum, a black hole of comprehension into which every assumption, every career suggestion, every pitying glance was being pulled and destroyed. My mother dropped the dish towel. Jason's laptop slid off his knee, and he didn't notice. Danielle's phone clattered onto her plate. Tyler's mouth formed a perfect O. My father's pie fork was suspended in midair, frozen in the exact position it had been when the word Forbes entered the room. I kept it private by design, I said into the phone. The work was always more important than the recognition. I wanted the properties to speak for themselves. I wanted tenants to stay because the buildings were excellent, not because the founder was famous. And frankly, I wanted to prove that you don't need a public profile or a college degree to build something extraordinary. My mother made a sound. Small, involuntary. The kind of sound you make when something you believed to be true for a decade turns out to be the opposite. Rebecca continued. Your affordable housing initiative alone has provided below market rate homes to over 3,000 families. Can you tell us about the philosophy behind that? Real estate shouldn't just be about returns, I said. It should be about responsibility. Every building I buy is a community. The people inside it aren't revenue lines on a spreadsheet. They're families. When you treat them that way, the returns follow naturally. Our retention rate is 89%. That's not a business metric. That's a trust metric. I could feel 21 pairs of eyes drilling into me with varying intensities of shock, confusion, and dawning realization. Miss Cole, one final question for tonight, Rebecca said. When our readers see this feature, many of them will be stunned that a 30-year-old woman with no college degree built one of the largest privately held residential real estate companies in America without any public recognition whatsoever. What would you say to people who will inevitably ask how this is possible? I looked at my mother while I answered. I'd say that the most valuable things are often built by the people nobody's watching, the people others have written off, the people sitting at family dinner tables being told they need direction while quietly owning half the buildings in their city, the people who don't need recognition because the work itself is enough. I paused, and I'd say that underestimation is the greatest competitive advantage in business. If no one expects anything from you, no one gets in your way. Rebecca laughed. That's going on the cover. We'll be in touch Monday for the full interview. Thank you, Adrian. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, Rebecca. I hung up. The dining room was a museum of frozen expressions. My mother was leaning against the kitchen door frame, one hand over her mouth, tears running down her face. My father had set his fork down so slowly, it was as though he was afraid it might shatter. Jason was staring at me like I'd just performed surgery on the dining table. Danielle had her hand pressed against her chest. Tyler was grinning with the unbridled delight of a younger sibling who'd just witnessed the family hierarchy collapse in real time. Aunt Gloria had woken Uncle Dave by squeezing his arm so hard he yelped. $2 billion, my father said. He said it the way people say numbers they can't quite attach to reality. The words were correct, but the meaning hadn't landed yet. $1.8 billion in portfolio value, I clarified. Revenue is $312 million annually. My net worth is approximately $940 million, depending on market conditions. Jason set his laptop on the floor, very carefully, like a man placing a bomb. You own buildings, he said. Yes, real buildings, 4,600 units. He looked at his hospital renderings on the laptop screen, then back at me. I design buildings, he said slowly. You own them. I own them, I confirmed. Danielle found her voice. You said you were doing some property stuff. I was, I said. Quite a lot of property stuff, as it turns out. Tyler was openly laughing now. He couldn't help it. This is the greatest Thanksgiving of my life, he said, echoing a sentiment that only younger siblings and people with a highly developed sense of irony can truly appreciate. My mother walked slowly from the kitchen doorway to the table. She sat down in her chair. She looked at the Costco pie, then at me, then at the space between those two realities where her understanding of her daughter had previously existed. You own buildings, she repeated, as though testing whether the words would feel different the second time. I own 4,600 apartments across 11 states, I said. I provide homes for over 12,000 people. My company has won 3 industry awards for community development. And yes, Mom, I have a career. She broke. Not dramatically, quietly. The way things break when they've been under pressure for a long time and something finally releases. She put her head in her hands and cried. I moved to the chair next to her and put my arm around her shoulders. It's okay, I said. I know. But you sat here, she managed through tears. Year after year, we went around the table and you never said anything. Because you never asked, I said gently. You announced what I was. You told the table I was still figuring things out. You categorized me. You never once said, Adrian, tell us about your year. You told them what my year was. And you were always wrong. She looked up at me with swollen eyes. The nursing brochure at Easter. The dental hygienist suggestion at your birthday. The time I asked if you wanted to work at Bob's Realty. I remember all of them, I said. I own more real estate than Bob has sold in his entire career. A laugh escaped through her tears, involuntary, almost pained. My father cleared his throat. He stood up at the head of the table, the position he'd occupied for every holiday meal since I was born. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen directed my way. Respect, and something else. Shame. I owe you an apology, he said, not just for tonight. For every year I sat at this table and reduced you to a punchline between your siblings' accomplishments. He turned to the room. We all do. Uncle Dave, now fully awake, nodded vigorously. Aunt Gloria was clutching a napkin like a life raft. Jason stood up. Soph, he started, then corrected himself. Adrian, can I see the portfolio? Not as an architect looking for work, as a brother who wants to understand what his sister built. Tomorrow, I said, come to the office. You'll need a few hours. Danielle wiped her eyes and said the most honest thing she'd ever said at a family gathering. I've been so busy being proud of my own promotion that I never noticed my sister built an empire. That might be the most embarrassing thing about tonight. Tyler raised his glass. To Adrian, he said, the free spirit who owns half of Connecticut. I smiled. Not half, maybe a quarter. The laughter that followed was different from any laughter I'd heard at this table. It wasn't polite. It wasn't performative. It wasn't at anyone's expense. It was the sound of a family recalibrating, of assumptions dissolving, of people seeing each other clearly for the first time in years. I put on my coat. Where are you going? Mom asked. Same as always, I said. Home. She nodded. Then she stood, walked to me, and hugged me with a ferocity that contained 30 years of miscalculation and the beginning of something corrected. I'm sorry I never asked, she whispered. That's all I ever wanted, I said, for you to ask. The drive home took 20 minutes. I passed 7 buildings I owned without thinking about it. They were just buildings. The people inside them were what mattered. Lisa called as I pulled into my parking space. How did it go? The call or the family? Both. The call was perfect. The family is processing. She paused. Forbes just emailed. They want you for the cover. Not the feature, the actual cover. I sat in my 8-year-old Jeep in the parking lot of the modest apartment building I chose to live in, surrounded by a city I quietly owned significant portions of, and I laughed. Tell them yes, I said, but I'm wearing what I want, not a power suit. She knew exactly what I meant. The cardigan. The Forbes cover ran 6 weeks later. a photo of me in my oversized cardigan, standing in front of one of my affordable housing developments, surrounded by tenants who'd become community. The headline read, "The $1.8 billion woman nobody knew." Inside, a 12-page feature told the story of a college dropout who built one of the largest residential real estate portfolios in America without a single press release, a single public appearance, or a single family member who knew. The response was extraordinary. Within a week of publication, every major business outlet wanted a follow-up. Bloomberg ran a documentary segment. The Wall Street Journal published an analysis of our investment model. 3 governors reached out about expanding our affordable housing initiatives into their states. The real estate industry, which had known Cole Residential Partners by reputation, but never by founder, was stunned. Conference invitations flooded in. Partnership proposals arrived daily, and the most meaningful response came from the people who actually lived in my buildings. A tenant in our New Haven complex, a single mother of 3 who'd been on the verge of homelessness before moving into one of our affordable units, wrote me a letter. She'd seen the Forbes cover at a newsstand. "I didn't know the person who gave me a home was someone like me," she wrote. "Someone the world overlooked. Thank you for building something that remembers the people everyone else forgets." I framed that letter. It hangs in my office next to the Forbes cover. They're both important. But the letter is the one I read when I need to remember why I do this. Jason visited the office the following week. He spent an entire day walking through our operations, studying the renovation plans, examining the property management systems. He called me that night, his architect's mind still processing. "You've built something I couldn't have imagined," he said. "Not just the portfolio, the philosophy, the way you think about buildings as communities instead of assets. I've been designing spaces for years. You've been building homes." He paused. "I want to help, not for money, not for my portfolio, because what you're doing matters more than anything I've drawn on paper." I hired him as a consultant 3 months later. His first project was redesigning the common spaces in our oldest properties to foster community connection. He did it for cost, no profit margin. It was the best work of his career, and he knew it. Danielle used her communications expertise to help us build our first public-facing brand strategy. Not for attention, for accountability. She argued, correctly, that a company providing homes for 12,000 people had a responsibility to be transparent about its operations, its values, and its leadership. Tyler deferred Stanford for a year to intern at Cole Residential Partners. He wanted to learn real business before studying theoretical business. Smart kid, always was. He just needed a different classroom. My mother bought 40 copies of Forbes. She gave them to everyone she knew. Inside each one, she'd placed a sticky note on the cover. "This is my daughter," it read. I spent 9 years thinking she needed direction. She was the direction all along. And at the next Thanksgiving, when my mother went around the table asking everyone to share their accomplishments, she got to me and did something she'd never done before. She stopped talking and said 5 words. "Adrian, tell us about your year." That was enough. That was everything. Because success was never about the buildings or the Forbes cover. It was about the moment someone who'd written you off finally hands you the microphone and says, "I'm listening." And you realize you've been ready to speak the whole time. You were just waiting for someone to ask.